In the name of Allah, the most beneficial, the most merciful, uh, I am here to present hyperglycemia and pregnancy, few evidences and facts which are available the world over, and what we are supposed to do in this situation. And I'm thankful again to SOGP, PAS, Roche Diagnostics to provide us this opportunity to share uh, our views and the facts about hyperglycemia and pregnancy. And there's no conflict of interest for this presentation. And we all know that hyperglycemia is one of the most common medical conditions women encounter during pregnancy. And according to 2019 IDF estimates, 20.4 million women are suffering from diabetes at this time at this time. And the age group, with the increasing age group, the prevalence of diabetes is also increasing. To the extent that there are 7 countries in the world, according to FIGO, and 55% of the global live births and 55% of the global burden of diabetes is borne by these countries, which include India, China, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. That means 1 in 6 live births are affected by hyperglycemia in pregnancy, adding to the huge global burden of disease. And if you look at this map, which was published in 2019 by IDF, International Diabetes Federation, the gray areas in the world, they have no data source for hyperglycemia and pregnancy. We can see Pakistan somewhere here, but still we know that there are no appropriate data source available with our country also. The reason we all know that there is no consensus for the agreed definition and screening methodology all over the world, all over the country, and in different units of our OBGYN departments. So the points of discussion will be, I'll talk a little bit about history of insulin, screening and diagnostic strategies for hyperglycemia and pregnancy, and a little bit about insulin, when to start, and appropriate dosage and timings of insulin. So we are celebrating insulin centenary, that means 100 years of insulin. We all know that it was discovered in 1921, and this was an opportunity to reflect on the advancement of diabetes care in the past 100 years, an ambition for the next 100 years to strive to defeat diabetes and manage hyperglycemia in pregnancy. And we also know that before the advent of insulin, pregnancy was almost impossible. The outlook for both woman and infant remained dismal. Maternal mortality was 50%, and the rate of pregnancy loss was more than 40%. Those women who were saved in the pregnancy, they used to die in the next 2 years because of complications or tuberculosis as a result of diabetes in pregnancy. This situation was so dismal that Dr. Joseph D. Lee, who was considered as father of obstetrics those days in 1913, he stressed that pregnancy should be terminated if complicated by diabetes, as the maternal and fetal risk was too high. And the irony of the situation was that most obstetricians supported Deely's recommendation at that time. Talking about Jocelyn, who was the first American who specialized in diabetes, and in his manual, which he wrote for doctors and patients in 1919, 2 years before the advent of insulin, he said that no diabetic boy or girl should get married until they are ready to face the problems of diabetes with a smile. He further advised that marriage involves no danger for women, but parturition does involve danger for the woman. And then he finally about genetic advice. He said that true diabetics should not marry and have children. The discovery of insulin was the start of journey towards saving and improving lives. And when with the start of before the advent of insulin, 100 years ago, a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes or hyperglycemia in pregnancy meant certain perinatal, maternal, and child mortality. This Thomson's Leonard was the child who was first injected the insulin. You can see that the picture before. He was 14 years of age, and you can see the picture after, 2 months after he was started with insulin. So such was the revolution for type 1 diabetics and also for hyperglycemia in pregnancy. Elizabeth Evan Hughes, who was the daughter of Charles Evans Hughes, who was the Secretary of State in US, was one of the Bentinck's most famous patients. At age 15, Elizabeth weighed only 45 pounds, and she survived and later had several successful pregnancies. Over the last 70 years, since the discovery of insulin, the pregnancy outcomes in terms of perinatal mortality in women with insulin-dependent diabetes has continued to improve. But what is happening in our part of the world?
अस्सलाम वालेकुम इकरा, आपकी उम्र 21 साल है, आपकी शादी को 1.5 साल हुआ है और आप हमारे पास अभी माहवारी वो अपने हमल के 5वें महीने में आई है ना, और आपको अभी अल्ट्रासाउंड में कुछ मसला बताया गया है। क्या मसला बता रहे हैं आपके बच्चे? दिल बच्चे का सही नहीं बना हुआ है। और कोई तकलीफ आपकी मसला बताया गया है आपका? शुगर का, आपकी शक्कर बढ़ी हुई आ रही है ना। और कितने दिन पहले पता चला है? इससे पहले नहीं पता चला। आप डॉक्टर के पास गई थी इस प्रेगनेंसी में शुरू से? अच्छा, और शक्कर का टेस्ट नहीं हुआ था कभी? अच्छा, अभी जो है ये मुझे बताएं कि आपकी जो खानदान में किसी और को शक्कर है? आपकी अम्मी अब्बू को, भाइयों को? और भाइयों को? अब भाई आपके वजन में ज़्यादा है या नॉर्मल है? एक है। अच्छा, उसका टेस्ट हुआ है?
शादी रिश्तेदारों में?
शादी आपकी रिश्तेदारों में हुई है? गैरों?
So this is the irony of fate. This Primi Gravida, she is 19 weeks pregnant, has never been tested in early pregnancy. She had been attending doctors since the very start of her pregnancy. She has come from Sakkar, and incidentally, the fetal anomaly was found incompatible with life, and her blood sugar was more than 250 milligrams at her first attendance. So for one mistake made for not knowing, 10 mistakes are made for not looking. In spite of so many declarations, St. Vincent's Declaration 32 years back, then Colombo Declaration, I very well remember Professor Rubina Suhail was there with us. We were there rather with her, and a document was signed for urgent action and increased focus on maternal health to deal with diabetes onslaught in South Asia. But still, a meta-analysis of 100 studies shows significant association of pre-existing diabetes and adverse pregnancy outcomes. This was published in 2013. And it shows that increased preterm delivery, large gestational age, perinatal mortality, stillbirth, cesarean section, neonatal hypoglycemia, and NICU admissions. Another very important thing is hyperglycemia at conception is associated with risk of congenital malformations. We just saw this picture, this video, and the risk of congenital malformation and anomaly in women with pre-existing diabetes exponentially increases with increase in HbA1c, and therefore peri-conception HbA1c is very important to know the situation of diabetes control in this women. And this was a population-based cohort study conducted in more than 4 million singleton pregnancies and was published in 2012. So what is the importance of early blood glucose screening in pregnancy? See, we are emphasizing on early blood glucose screening in pregnancy against the advices which we see in many of guidelines, international guidelines. So at the moment, there are no agreed screening and diagnostic standards as is happening in the world, so is happening in our country. And the reason I am showing these few slides are that the prevalence of overall diabetes, according to national survey published in 2017, 26% people are living with diabetes. And prevalence of pre-diabetes is almost 15%, with overweight 76% and obese 62%. So early versus late screening protocol, how do we justify that? We belong to Asian ethnicity. Obesity, you already had just seen the slide. Higher body mass index, insulin resistance are added risk factors for undiagnosed diabetes in early pregnancy, as we just witnessed in the previous video. And there are many more stories around us in the clinical practice. So women do not come outside the pregnancy for testing. So this increases the need for early screening during pregnancy to identify and treat dysglycemia before the period of rapid fetal organogenesis from 0 to 8 weeks. We all know. And if you miss this period, then diagnosing after that would lead to adverse fetal outcomes. So this study, high prevalence of gestational diabetes mellitus in early pregnancy in Asian Indians. This is the STRIDE study, which is being headed by our very good friend, Dr. V. Mohan from south of India. And he said that the prevalence of GDM is high even during the first trimester in Asian Indian population. And this calls for early screening for GDM among high-risk ethnic groups like Asian Indians. And most of our diabetes data we used to extrapolate from Indian studies so far. So I think we also are Asian and we need early screening for GDM because early development of GDM is now coming up. It's not somebody is diagnosed at 12 weeks may not be pre-existing, but maybe a case of early GDM, gestational diabetes mellitus. Another study which we conducted in Pakistan, World Diabetes Foundation and GDM project in Pakistan, we saw that there were 24% of the women were positive for hyperglycemia in the first 20 weeks of pregnancy. This again emphasizes the early screening protocols for hyperglycemia to uncover the women with hyperglycemia. So recommended blood glucose screening, this is very important for all our doctors to understand that at first antenatal visit, all pregnant women are advised a 75 grams, 2 hours oral glucose tolerance test, irrespective of risk factors. That means a universal screening. All women should be screened. And OGTT for blood glucose screening should be done following 8 hours of fasting and 2 hours after 75 grams glucose low. Dissolve in 250 cc of water, and the woman should be advised to drink it over a period of 3 to 5 minutes to avoid nausea and vomiting. And this is again being malpracticed by many of the laboratories, many of the doctors. Still, we are asking for random blood glucose, and that has no meaning in pregnancy. And one more important thing is that diagnostic values for GDM are different from diagnostic values of pre-existing diabetes mellitus. So if a woman after OGTT has 1 hour fasting 92, fasting 92, 1 hour 180, and 2 hours more than 153, any of the above values will be considered as diagnostic of GDM. These values are given everywhere. These are the same as IDS-PG criteria. And if it is a pre-existing diabetes, then the blood glucose values, if it is fasting more than 126, 2 hours, or any random value more than 200, and HbA1c more than 65, will be considered as having pre-existing diabetes mellitus. So there are differences in the values. Please remember these different values so as to treat and identify the women in the right category. Women who have normal blood glucose values on initial OGTT, a second OGTT is recommended during 24 to 28 weeks of gestation. And in our situation, most of the guidelines, they say that do not do testing after 24, 28. But again, in third trimester, if she is screen negative in the first 2 trimesters, and especially if she belongs to high risk group, if she is obese, had a macrosomic baby, family history of diabetes, previous history of GDM, and obviously an Asian ethnicity. So if it is not possible for the woman to come in fasting state, for an OGTT, then a DIPSI method is advisable, a diabetes and pregnancy study group India. These are our friends from south of India, Professor Sisaya and Balaji, and they have devised this method that in this DIPSI method, no fasting is required. Again, 75 grams of glucose is dissolved in 250 cc of water, same 3 to 5 minutes of drinking, and a venous sample is taken 2 hours after the glucose solution ingestion. And here, the diagnostic cutoff is 140 milligrams per dl. Now, HbA1c testing is very important. But remember that HbS testing is not recommended for screening and diagnosis of GDM. We just had a patient 2 days back and she was, visiting the OPD with HbA1c testing, and she had previous bad obstetrical outcome. So HbA1c test should be performed during the first trimester of pregnancy to identify and prevent poor pregnancy outcome. As was shown in video, her HbA1c was 7.2 when she first presented to hospital. And high value, more than 6.5%, is diagnostic of pregestational diabetes mellitus that may be associated with higher risk of fetal anomalies in women with pre-existing diabetes. But HbA1c testing is not recommended for screening and diagnosis. Again, I'm emphasizing for our junior doctors and our practicing physicians. Now, the failure to diagnose is a great problem.
मेरा नाम
Can you all
शवाल
hear the
खातून
voice
है
in this
और
recording?
मैं लड़काना से आई हूँ और ये है कि
Dr.
मेरा
Halima,
जो
can
है
you
ना
hear the
अभी
voice?
8वां बच्चा है जिसमें मेरे पास सिर्फ 2 बच्चे हैं और बाकी सब जो है ना वो कोई 3 महीने में कोई 2 महीने में ज़ाया हो गए हैं। तो हम यहाँ कराची
Dr.
आए
Halima,
थे
can you hear the voice in
अल्तिब्री
this recording?
अस्पताल में किसी और मरीज़ को दिखाने, तो फिर हमें बोला गया कि
So this woman was from Sakkar. She was in 3rd month of her pregnancy, and she had multiple pregnancy losses previously, but was never tested for hyperglycemia in pregnancy. And she came to us with somebody else, and we found her with high blood sugar levels. So in spite of so many pregnancy mishaps, she was never tested for her blood glucose in pregnancy. And the irony of fate was that she was attending a tertiary care institution and she was given Clexine in view of previous pregnancy losses. But nobody thought of testing for her blood glucose values. This is something which we, very small, very basic test, and we tend to miss it. So relationship of lifestyle in obstetric and perinatal outcome is, there is a huge relationship of lifestyle in obstetric and perinatal outcome. Review of retrospective review shows that insulin and lifestyle alone, as far as maternal weight gain, hypertension, and preeclampsia has got same p-value. That means if lifestyle is advocated, maybe that we do not need insulin at the first instance. It is such an important intervention. Similar is the case with lifestyle plus insulin and lifestyle only. There is, as far as fetal outcomes are concerned, macrosomia, birth weight, premature births, and neonatal jaundice and shoulder dystocia, the p-value is insignificant. That means lifestyle modification must be advocated to women because we find it easier to write insulin and difficult to tell so much about the lifestyle. The question is that when should medical therapy be started? The standard of care is to start the medical therapy fasting blood glucose is more than 95 because we cannot procrastinate for a longer time. We have to decide within 1 week of uncontrolled hyperglycemia in pregnancy. If fasting is more than 95, if 1 hour postprandial glucose levels are more than 140, and 2 hours postprandial glucose levels are more than 120 milligrams, this is the time to decide for uh, therapy, insulin medical therapy for diabetes. So metformin is the time-tested drug. Glibenclamide is no more being advocated because of its fetal effects and neonatal effects. So the important message is that switch from oral hypoglycemic agents to insulin should be done prior to conception. If a woman has conceived on some oral hypoglycemic agents, any hypoglycemic agents, please do not immediately change that and shift her to insulin, because insulin would take some time for finding the optimal dosage and control. And hyperglycemia in fetus, hyperglycemia that the fetus is exposed to is more dangerous to fetal DNA than any of the present oral hypoglycemic treatments. So shift her to insulin gradually. Insulin is the drug of choice that we all know for the treatment of hyperglycemia in pregnancy because it does not cross placental barrier. But in developing world with increasing rate of diabetes, cultural beliefs at odds with insulin injections and prohibitive costs, and the fears, beliefs, and the knowledge which is not there in healthcare providers, unfortunately, and in women who are to be administered this insulin. And in addition, usage, storage, and cost of insulin, they are all the important barriers which has to be taken into consideration. So the different insulin therapies which are used in pregnancy do not seem to affect obstetric and perinatal outcomes. We have to remember this. Our students, our doctors, our family practitioners, they have to remember this, that all insulin therapies are almost same. By all I mean those where the pregnancy category is in B. See, regular, aspart, and lispro, they are the short-acting insulins against NPH and Detimer, which are long-acting insulin. So regular, aspart, lispro, NPH, Detimer, they fall into category B. Glargine, there are studies coming up, but let us wait for sometimes more before we finally advocate for the use of glargine. So the best insulin to use is again regular and NPH because of the cost, because of the convenience, and because of convenience of the physicians that they are familiar with the use of regular and NPH. And different insulin therapies as far as pre-pregnancy HbA1c and mean HbA1c in pregnancy do not show any difference. Same is true for the perinatal and neonatal outcome. The p-value is insignificant for different neonatal outcomes in type 1 and also in GDM with type 2. See, their p-value is insignificant for median gestation age, Apgar score, NICU admissions, and hypoglycemia, neonatal hypoglycemia. Major hypoglycemia during pregnancy was similar in insulin Detimer and NPH. Yet they are long-acting insulin. Insulin Detimer is analog. It is good, but again, the cost is a consideration, and that must be taken into consideration before advising. Minor hypoglycemia during pregnancy was also similar in insulin Detimer and NPH. However, aspart may be especially helpful, which is a short-acting analog insulin. It may be helpful in women with hyperemesis or gastroparesis because they can be dosed after a successful meal. We usually give insulin before meal, but if somebody is having nausea and vomiting after she has successful meal, she can be administered aspart because it starts working within 5 minutes of its administration and is particularly effective for postprandial glycemic excursions. So finally, coming to an end, to have a good perinatal outcome, requirements of insulin regimen, combinations and timings in pregnancy need modification. And as pregnancy progresses, we know there is increased fetal demand for glucose. And glucose freely crosses the placental barrier. And the progressive lowering of maternal fasting and between meal blood glucose levels increase the risk of symptomatic hypoglycemia. And if you increase this short-acting insulin to meet that, then she is going to have interprandial hypoglycemia. So any insulin regimen in pregnancy requires combinations and timing of insulin injections quite different from those that are effective in non-pregnant state, and that must be understood by the physicians treating non-pregnant subject versus those who are treating pregnant subject. And finally, we have to begin with a dose of 0.5 to 1 unit per kilogram, depending on the period of gestation. In excessively obese women with a BMI of more than 35, we may have to start with 2 units per kilogram per day. And we also should remember that basal insulin needs to be less than 50%, while more than 50% is required as prandial insulin, because this is a postprandial hyperglycemia, which we have to take care of to avoid macrosomia in fetus. And insulin requirement in the earlier part of pregnancy needs to be lowered by 10 to 20% because of nausea and vomiting and increased insulin sensitivity, whereas the requirement is 2 times higher in later pregnancy. And anytime if after 24 weeks of pregnancy the requirement decreased, beware. There are only 2 conditions where the insulin requirement decreases: failing kidney or failing placenta. In pregnancy, the later statement is true that failing placenta needs increased fetal surveillance. So don't feel that the insulin requirement are going down, so she's faring better. So finally, the glycemic targets are more strict to achieve better maternal and perinatal outcome. And this preprandial bedtime overnight insulin glucose levels should not go beyond 99 milligrams per DL, and postprandial peaks must stay below 130 milligrams per DL with an HbA1c of less than 6% if there are no significant hypoglycemia in women. Different insulin therapies used in pregnant women do not affect obstetric and fetal outcomes. Its poor glycemic control prior to or during gestation is associated with poor obstetric and maternal outcomes, obstetric and fetal outcomes. Any insulin regimen, type and dosage for pregnant women requires combination and timing of insulin injections different from those that are effective in non-pregnant state with strict glycemic targets. With this, I thank to all the participants with this presentation. Thank you very much.